At exactly 8:03 a.m., a rented yellow bulldozer rammed what used to be my cabin's living room straight into Lake Winterglass. The wall slid in with a polite splash, bobbed once like a stunned alligator, and disappeared beneath the surface. I took a photo, took a breath, and then pulled my badge from my pocket. Across the torn-up shoreline, HOA President Rhonda Pennington jabbed a clipboard toward me and shouted, "Sir, you can't be here. This is HOA business." I stayed calm. "Rhonda, I'm literally the county building inspector." She blinked twice. Her perfectly sprayed bangs didn't move an inch in the morning breeze. Behind her, the guy in the bulldozer looked confused, one hand on the controls, the other holding a gas station breakfast burrito. My kitchen window frame dangled from the bucket like a broken picture frame. In the wreckage, I could still see my coffee maker. It was still plugged in. My name's Owen Briggs, 42 years old. Divorced 7 years, no kids. One dog named Code, who's better at finding survey stakes than most professionals. I keep my head down, my paperwork perfect, and my weekend sacred at Pine Haven Shores. 1 page of lake, 2 pages of trees, and an HOA powered by 3 ring binder energy. The cabin, my cabin, was a 100-year-old cedar box that smelled like coffee and wet pine needles. Built in 1924 by a lumber baron who believed in corner joints strong enough to survive the apocalypse. I bought it 3 years ago for next to nothing because it needed love. New roof, new plumbing, restored the original windows, refinished the floors by hand, the kind of work that requires patience, bourbon, and a few good podcasts. I did everything by the book. Every permit filed, every inspection passed, every document carefully labeled. Projects that wouldn't come back to bite me later. Then Rhonda arrived. Bangs like a barricade, voice like a rolling suitcase on tile, and a devotion to HOA bylaws that could have been its own religion. She and her husband, Greg, a man so quiet I wasn't sure he could speak until I heard him whisper, "Yes, dear at the mailbox, and moved into Pine Haven Shores 2 years ago." She acknowledged me exactly once with a curt nod that said, "I see you, and I'm cataloging you." When she found out I owned the Lakeside cabin on Lot 14, the one with the stone chimney that blocked her dock's view, she discovered her new calling, structural purity. She announced it at an HOA meeting. I didn't attend, but definitely heard about. During new business, she stood up, opened a binder, and declared that our neighborhood was suffering from aesthetic inconsistencies. Translation: my cabin looked like a cabin, not one of those beige vinyl boxes with a 2-car garage. It started small. Sticky notes disguised as violations. Unauthorized deck extension, even though the deck was original and grandfathered. Non-compliant fascia color, though the fascia was natural cedar, perfectly allowed under Section 12.4 of the covenants I'd memorized. Uses cordwood as decor, which was actually just my neatly stacked firewood, like humans have done since fire was invented. I ignored the sticky notes. Big mistake. Rhonda took silence as surrender. She started snapping photos through my hedges at dawn. Some so zoomed in I could see the reflection of her phone case in my window. She crawled along my property line with an extendable rake she called a measuring device, poking at my fence posts like a furious archaeologist. Then came her online crusade, a Pine Haven Shores Facebook group called Protect Our Shoreline from Rustic Blight. 37 members, 14 real people, the rest? Clearly her alternate accounts with names like Concerned Homeowner 2 and Patricia L., who suspiciously shared her same profile picture, just wearing a hat. The violations kept getting stranger. Unapproved landscape rocks, in which were literally rocks from the ground. Mail delivery obstruction, because my mailbox sat 4 inches closer to the road than hers. And my favorite, dock safety concerns, after she measured my dock at 6 a.m. on a Sunday while I was drinking coffee in my underwear. Then came the letter, official HOA letterhead. Certified mail, the kind your mail carrier hands you with pity. The architectural committee had voted to remove a non-conforming structure that was supposedly endangering property values. Their evidence? A forged stop work order with a county seal that looked like it had been printed on a home inkjet. A laminated demolition authorization, because apparently lamination equals legitimacy. And a structural engineer's report claiming my cabin was a collapse risk, signed by Ronald Donnelly, P.E., who turned out to be Rhonda's brother-in-law from Ohio. He designed HVAC systems, not structures, and definitely not in this state. No one contacted the county. No permits, no notices, no due process. The letter said demolition was scheduled for Monday at 8 a.m. I read it Friday night while grilling burgers. I laughed. I checked the county database just to be sure this whole thing was as fake as it looked. It was. No permits, no applications, no variance requests, nothing. I called my buddy Marcus over at the county attorney's office and read him the letter. He laughed so hard he started coughing. "Owen, you should let this play out," he said between laughs. "Document everything." "Marcus," I said, "they're going to bulldoze my house." "Yeah," he replied. "And then you're going to retire early. I'll be out fishing Monday morning. Let them show up, realize they've got no legal grounds and slink off embarrassed. File a complaint afterward, maybe get Rhonda a formal warning. Easy. Except Rhonda wasn't after legality. She was after victory. At dawn, my phone pinged. Motion alert. My security camera showed a skid steer crawling down my driveway like a caffeinated beetle, followed by a white pickup truck with a magnetic sign that read Brad's Demo and Lawn Care. I was in my kitchen pouring coffee, watching it all unfold on my phone. Rhonda stepped out of her Lexus SUV wearing a bright safety vest over her Sunday church clothes, directing Brad like a general lining up artillery. I grabbed my truck keys. I didn't speed. Didn't roll through stop signs. I obeyed every traffic law on the way there. 6 minutes later, I pulled up to find 2-day laborers in my yard looking deeply uncomfortable, and Brad, Rhonda's nephew, wearing a vest that said event staff and clutching a clipboard, the demo permit. They waved at me had my signature, or something that vaguely resembled it if you squinted, hard enough and had never seen my actual one. My last name was misspelled Brigus. The notary stamp was from Wisconsin. The county seal, the old hexagonal one we retired 5 years ago. I held it up to the light. Rhonda crossed her arms, oozing smugness. "Everything is in order, Mr. Briggs. You can leave now." I radioed dispatch. "This is Inspector Briggs, badge number 847. I need a deputy at 421 Lakeshore Drive. Possible criminal trespass and active property destruction. Carol," the dispatcher. I'd known for a decade and came back with a smirk in her voice. "Owen, is this the HOA thing?" "Carol," I said, watching drywall fly. "They're demolishing my house." "Deputies en route," she said, and I could hear her grinning. Then I called the sheriff's personal cell. "Mike, I need you. Is this about Rhonda?" he asked immediately. Word travels fast in a county of 12,000. I flipped open my code book, the one I keep in my truck. Pages tabbed and highlighted like a legal Christmas tree. I turned to the section on floodplain overlay districts. Pine Haven Shores sits inside an AFMA floodplain zone. Any demolition requires silt fencing, debris containment, an erosion control plan, and, most importantly, written permission from the property owner. I said this out loud, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then I looked Brad in the eye. "Brad, if you proceed, you're committing a felony." Brad hesitated, looked at Rhonda. "He's bluffing," Rhonda snapped. "Proceed." To his credit as a human being, and detriment as a critical thinker, Brad climbed back into the bulldozer, started the engine, and drove the bucket straight through my kitchen wall. The wall burst open in a cloud of drywall and insulation. My sink slid into the lake. Rhonda clapped. She actually clapped, like it was halftime at a football game. Then came the sirens. Deputy Carlson arrived first, lights flashing like it was a bank robbery. 2 more units followed. Then my colleague Priya from Environmental Health, who must have been listening on the radio, and, because Rhonda apparently called everyone she knew, the local reporter from the Pine County Gazette, Trevor, who could smell drama like a shark smells blood. I walked the perimeter, documenting everything. 47 photos. Drywall tumbling into the lake. Insulation floating like sad clouds. My kitchen table half submerged, still set with a coffee mug. Every angle. Every code violation. Every scrap of debris. Then I wrote the fattest red tag of my career. Stop work. County order. Violations. Unpermitted demolition. Floodplain breach. Hazardous debris discharge. Falsified documents. Forgery of county seal. I used my label maker. Laminated it. Because if Rhonda could laminate her fake permit, I could laminate my real one. I slapped it on the bulldozer like a bumper sticker. Then I handed Brad a citation. He looked like he might cry. "Brad," I said gently, "you're going to want a lawyer." Next, I handed Rhonda a stack of forms heavy enough to tone her triceps. Notice of violation, environmental contamination report, demand for immediate remediation. Her hands shook as she took them, her face flickering between confusion, rage, and the dawning realization that she had made a spectacular mistake. Priya roped off the shoreline with yellow caution tape, already calculating fines per cubic foot of soggy cabin debris, grinning like it was Christmas morning. The sheriff bagged the forged permit like evidence, and because it was evidence, he turned to Rhonda, calm and steady. "Ma'am," he said, "you're going to need to come down to the station." Rhonda's voice cracked. "I want my lawyer." "That's probably smart," he said. The clearing went silent except for the hum of the bulldozer still idling. Trevor was snapping photos. The day laborers had vanished. Brad sat in the dirt, head in his hands. I stood there, badge on my belt, coffee growing cold in the truck, and thought, this is going to be a very long week. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Thursday at the Pine County Annex, a building that smells like old carpet and fear, where the fluorescent lights judge you harder than any magistrate. I rolled in a projector. Rhonda showed up with 2 lawyers, an HOA board that looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, and an insurance rep who kept checking his phone like he was waiting for a call from God himself. The magistrate, Judge Patricia Cordell, a woman famous for shutting down an illegal puppy mill with nothing but a gavel and pure fury, took her seat and said, "Let's begin. I started with slide 1, the fake demolition permit bearing my forged signature. I projected it on the wall, then placed a W-9 form from last month beside it, one that had my real signature. The difference was obvious. The slant was off, the pressure was wrong, even the loops were lazy." Judge Cordell leaned forward. "Mr. Briggs, is that your signature?" she asked. "No, Your Honor," I replied. "That's someone's very bad attempt at it." I pointed out the misspelled name, the outdated county seal, and the Wisconsin notary stamp on a document supposedly signed in our county. Rhonda's lawyer began frantically flipping through papers like there might be a hidden escape hatch in there somewhere. Slide 2, the email. I had subpoenaed the HOA's email server, something they were legally required to maintain as a nonprofit. I displayed an email from Rhonda to her board titled Lot 14 Action Plan. The body of the email read, word for word, "Let's just do it and make Owen deal with it. If we wait for county approval, we'll never get rid of that cabin. No one will care once it's gone. I'll handle the permits," 3 board members replied. 2 asked, "Are you sure about this?" 1 said, "Let's discuss this at the meeting." Not a single one said no. Judge Cordell turned to the board and asked if they wanted to make a statement. They didn't. Slide 3, drone footage. I'd hired a drone operator after the demolition to document the damage, but I also had footage from 2 weeks before, since I sometimes fly my own drone for site surveys. The video clearly showed Rhonda dragging a broken pallet onto my beach, positioning it by the water, snapping a few photos, then dragging it back to her truck. Those same photos were later submitted to the board as proof of my so-called illegal construction. Same pallet, same spot, same angle, and her photo timestamps were just 15 minutes after my drone footage. The magistrate let out a low whistle, the kind that says, "You're in serious trouble." Then I called Priya to the stand. She testified about the environmental violations, introducing construction debris into a navigable waterway, contaminating a protected lake, and breaking FEMA floodplain regulations. She'd calculated the fines, $63,000. The insurance rep made a sound like a stepped-on squeaky toy. Next, I called the sheriff. He testified about the forged permit, the fake county seal, and the falsified signature. Their investigation had traced the document back to a print shop in the next county, paid for with Rhonda's own credit card. Rhonda's lawyer jumped up to object. Judge Cordell didn't even blink. "Overruled," she said. "Sit down." Then the magistrate began reading out the list of violation, like she was reading a menu of justice. Criminal forgery for whoever drafted the permit. Conspiracy to commit trespass. Unlawful demolition. Environmental violations for introducing debris into a protected waterway. and civil liability for the full replacement cost of a historic structure, estimated at $240,000. Then she looked straight at the HOA board and said, "And you are jointly and severally liable." The insurance rep stood up, pale as a ghost. "Your Honor," he said, "we're denying this claim. Forgery and intentional acts aren't covered." And with that, he walked out, leaving the board members staring at each other like they'd just seen their futures evaporate. Judge Cordell turned to Rhonda. "Mrs. Pennington," she said evenly, "you forged county documents, trespassed on private property, ordered the demolition of a home without legal authority, and contaminated a public waterway. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal charges." Rhonda blinked, her face frozen in disbelief. "In the meantime," the judge continued, "you are to pay full restitution for the cabin's replacement, all environmental fines and Mr. Briggs's legal fees, which I am awarding in full." The board, realizing just how deep they were in it, voted right there on the record to remove Rhonda as president. Effective immediately, Judge Cordell wasn't finished. "You are barred from serving on any HOA board or committee for the next 10 years. You'll also complete 40 hours of community service with the County Environmental Health Department and attend mandatory ethics training titled Authentic Seals and You twice a year for 5 years. Rhonda just stood there, her face the color of a fire hydrant, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Her clipboard slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a sharp clatter. One of her lawyers tried to steady her with a hand on her shoulder. She shrugged him off. Her voice cracked as she said, This isn't fair." Judge Cordell leaned forward, her tone cool and final. "Mrs. Pennington, you demolished a man's home with a forged permit," she said. "Fair is not the word I'd use." Then she raised the gavel. Court adjourned. And just like that, the woman who had spent years swinging bylaws like weapons finally learned the hard way. The law bites back. Criminal forgery for whoever drafted the permit. Conspiracy to commit trespass. Unlawful demolition. Environmental violations for introducing debris into a protected waterway. And civil liability for the full replacement cost of a historic structure, estimated at $240,000. Then she looked straight at the HOA board and said, "And you are jointly and severally liable." The insurance rep stood up, pale as a ghost. "Your Honor," he said, "we're denying this claim. Forgery and intentional acts aren't covered." And with that, he walked out, leaving the board members staring at each other like they'd just seen their futures evaporate. Judge Cordell turned to Rhonda. "Mrs. Pennington," she said evenly, "you forged county documents, trespassed on private property, ordered the demolition of a home without legal authority, and contaminated a public waterway. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal charges." Rhonda blinked, her face frozen in disbelief. "In the meantime," the judge continued, "you are to pay full restitution for the cabin's replacement, all environmental fines and Mr. Briggs's legal fees, which I am awarding in full." The board, realizing just how deep they were in it, voted right there on the record to remove Rhonda as president. Effective immediately, Judge Cordell wasn't finished. "You are barred from serving on any HOA board or committee for the next 10 years. You'll also complete 40 hours of community service with the County Environmental Health Department and attend mandatory ethics training titled Authentic Seals and You twice a year for 5 years. Rhonda just stood there, her face the color of a fire hydrant, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Her clipboard slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a sharp clatter. One of her lawyers tried to steady her with a hand on her shoulder. She shrugged him off. Her voice cracked as she said, This isn't fair." Judge Cordell leaned forward, her tone cool and final. "Mrs. Pennington, you demolished a man's home with a forged permit," she said. "Fair is not the word I'd use." Then she raised the gavel. Court adjourned. And just like that, the woman who had spent years swinging bylaws like weapons finally learned the hard way. The law bites back.